This program contains graphic imagery. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, I'm Robert McNeil, and welcome to the fourth night of America at a Crossroads.
Tonight, when jihad was brought to Europe,
we didn't expect this of Spain. It's always been a friend of the Muslims.
It revealed the threat within.
The bombers were homegrown terrorists born and raised in the United Kingdom.
And then, a special NewsHour presentation. America is considered the land of freedom.
I realized that it was only in America that I would ever find myself.
Understand the lives of Muslims who call America home.
There's very much an American Islam.
Coming up next. Funding for America at a Crossroads was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
This is the Liverpool Street Underground station in London. During World War II, Londoners in their thousands slept in these stations to escape the German bombing. Today, faced with Islamist terrorism, Londoners can't escape down here. In July 2005, a suicide bomber blew himself up on a train near this station. In 4 coordinated attacks that morning, 52 commuters died and 700 were wounded. Unlike World War II, the enemy wasn't foreign, but homegrown terrorists. And that deeply worrying phenomenon has occurred across Europe. Tonight we look at this dismaying awakening in Britain, Holland, Italy, and Spain. We begin in Spain to see how police uncovered those behind the savage train bombings in Madrid, and how that trail led across Europe. This film contains some dramatization or recreation based on official records and surveillance cameras.
Europe, home to nearly 20 million Muslims. For decades they came, immigrants from North Africa and the Middle East, in search of work and a better life. But among today's young Muslims, that better life seems elusive. Many remain on the margins of society, aimless and frustrated.
They should be aware what it means to be Muslim in this godforsaken country.
After 9/11, Al-Qaeda reached among them, keen for new partners in its holy war. A few, inspired by bin Laden, angered by world events, turned to violence. Theirs was a new kind of jihad, fought in their home cities against fellow citizens. This is the story of how that new threat first emerged in an unsuspecting Europe and opened our eyes to the devastating potential of homegrown terrorists. Spain's towns and cities are home to 1 million Muslims. Most are well integrated, but not quite all of them. Early in 2003, a Muslim woman walked into a Madrid police station to report her husband for beating her. And she came with a warning that their apartment was a meeting place for Islamic fundamentalists and a safe house for traveling jihadists. Some were on their way to join the insurgency against the American occupation in Iraq.
They sang songs about jihad, and they were passing round films about Afghanistan and Iraq.
The woman also told the police they could be planning a terrorist attack.
And one time she'd overheard that some towers in Madrid could be among the targets.
The police were not convinced by her story.
It turned out to be very difficult to believe what the wife was telling us. We thought she might be lying or exaggerating the situation to get revenge on her husband for abusing her.
According to the wife, there was one man that many of the traveling jihadists asked to see. Serhan Faket, known as the Tunisian. It was a name that the police had heard before.
The Tunisian had been under investigation in Spain because of his relationship with a group of Syrians who'd been arrested in connection with the 9/11 attacks.
But that investigation had turned up nothing to concern the police about the respectable Tunisian.
Came to Spain because he was studying in Spain. He was a legal citizen in Spain, and really he bring no attention to him because of his open behavior.
After studying for a doctorate, the Tunisian had gotten a job working here, in the cafe of Madrid's main mosque.
I think we have no specific information about Serhan. I don't think he was a person who has to bring our attention in order to be investigated for any activity here in Spain.
Unknown even to his neighbors, the Tunisian was organizing jihadist meetings in the woman's apartment. Spain was a close ally of America in its war against terror. But the authorities didn't think that they would be a target for terrorism themselves.
The general consensus was that Spain was not under direct threat from any Islamist group whatsoever.
In May 2003, they were given pause for thought.
Terrorists strike at the heart of Casablanca.
At least 5 different bombs were set off, some by terrorists who also blew themselves up.
Morocco, just 8 miles from Spain's southern border, was rocked by 12 simultaneous suicide bombings.
I think that was the Rubicon crossing, let's say, when I thought, oh my God, this is coming closer.
Many of the dead had been at this Spanish club, enjoying a Friday evening out.
The bombers were locals, unsuspected of links to Al-Qaeda. In Spain, intelligence units began to take note, keen to learn the lessons of the Casablanca attacks.
We noticed that they adapt to the local situation. And the local situation in Morocco was to select these young people, be recruited, radicalized, and then there will be something similar in Spain that we have to be aware of.
Police began to take more seriously reports of radical groups on the fringes of Spain's Muslim community, especially the Tunisians. Phones were tapped, and a surveillance operation got underway.
It wasn't continuous surveillance, it was sporadic surveillance. Really, we didn't have sufficient resources for the investigation.
The police weren't geared up for an Islamist threat. They had hardly any Arabic speakers.
We couldn't get the telephone conversations translated quickly enough to be of any use.
That summer, their surveillance missed an unlikely meeting between the Tunisian and a Madrid drug dealer called Jamal Amidan. Amidan was a Moroccan criminal who had made his home in Spain over 10 years earlier.
My daughter introduced him to me in 1992. To me, he was a completely normal guy. How he got into it, I don't honestly know. Over there in Morocco, hashish is part of daily life, so I imagine that's how he got into drug trafficking.
Amidan became a familiar face in the suburb of Lavapiés. Known as El Chino, his charismatic personality attracted a loyal following among the area's poorer Moroccan immigrants. They were often among the 29% of foreigners in Spanish prisons.
Yes, he went to prison because of hashish. Going to prison, well, it can change you.
Chino and other Muslim prisoners were a captive audience for radical Muslim clerics now looking to turn criminals to jihad. Yet on the streets of Madrid, there was little to suggest that he had even found religion.
He used to go to parties and discos quite a lot. He drank normally, got on well with everyone. And I never saw him pray or ever enter a mosque at all.
But Chino did pray. His mosque was away from prying eyes. Chino had become part of Takfir wal Hijra, an extreme violent group, devout in private, but free to ignore the laws of Islam when preparing to fight their jihad. Takfiris believe any means are justified to fulfill their duty, the destruction of Western society. To most Muslims, Chino's beliefs were an aberration of Islam, but his loyal gang of street dealers were easily swayed. As their cell took shape, Chino and the Tunisian debated whether Spain, the Islamic world's gateway to Europe, should be their target. Guidance came from a familiar quarter. Osama bin Laden had issued a fatwa, and for the first time, Spain was an explicit target.
Por conseguir llegar a un acuerdo, por conseguir llegar a una solución.
Its president, José María Aznar, was one of America's most visible allies over Iraq.
One moment, you find the country in the center of this. And I understand the people that said, well, why? No? Why? But I thought always that this is the new responsibility for Spain.
At the earliest opportunity, Aznar had pledged his support for the invasion of Iraq and committed Spanish troops to enter the country after the war.
The policies that promote freedom, that promote democracy, to look my country between the two more important democracies in the world, the United States and the United Kingdom, is a good place. No, personally for me, that as well, but for my country.
It was not a popular position at home, least of all with young Muslims like Chino, who saw the West's involvement in Iraq as the latest example of Muslim oppression.
He kept on saying, we didn't expect this of Spain. It's always been a friend of the Muslims. Him and many others, not just him. And they were a bit angry, pissed off. He used to say, they have to get rid of him. They have to get rid of him, you mustn't vote for him. Because, he said, they're killing our brothers.
With Spain a declared target of Osama bin Laden, the country's state of alert was raised to red. Yet the most senior police officers still saw no sign that an attack was imminent.
I don't remember any assessment clearly pointing out that we were under specific threats. You can be a political scientist and say, well, if you are deploying with Bush and Tony Blair in Iraq, you will put yourself on a spot. But that's mere speculation. On facts and on evidence, and we had none.
But their forces in Iraq were hit. In November, 7 Spanish intelligence agents were killed by Iraqi insurgents. The work of their fellow jihadists was soon being watched by the cell emerging in Madrid. Using the words of jihadi strategists from around the world, the Tunisian and Chino fired up their men for action.
يعتقدون أنهم يستطيعون استخدام الديمقراطية لكي يخدعوا الناس، لكن الديمقراطية سوف تنقلب ضدهم.
صح. الله أكبر، نعم. الله أكبر من أمريكا. الله أكبر من أمتات. الله أكبر من دول عظمى. الله أكبر، نعم، الله أكبر.
Chino used the internet to learn from the experience of other jihadists who had launched attacks. On jihadist websites, he found ample advice, expertise, and instructions. Everything he needed to begin preparations for an attack, without even leaving his house. At the start of 2004, the police were none the wiser. Surveillance of the Tunisian and other known Islamists had taught them little.
That the Tunisian had been radicalized was something we didn't question. The problem was knowing what were his contacts, his relations with other people. He was living within the community. He was a person who went to work daily. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary, apart from adopt certain security measures.
The Tunisian was taking precautions, using only public payphones to speak to his key accomplice, Chino. The police remained unaware of their relationship. To them, Chino was just another drug dealer. But his double life as a takfiri continued with his latest deal, trading hashish for over 200 kilos of Spanish-made explosives. And having found them, he would oversee their theft and transfer to Madrid personally. He'd even found the perfect place to hide the explosives. Here, in the village of Chinchon, 20 miles outside Madrid.
He liked the countryside. He said to me, I have to get a farm. He told me he'd rented it for a year. He went there almost every day. But he didn't move out. He went back and forth, back and forth. They were doing it up in whatever way they could. I never saw anything odd.
By the end of February, the Tunisian and his group had everything they needed for their attack, including a date. The climax of Spain's election campaign was approaching.
La victoria el 14 de marzo en las elecciones generales.
But the authorities had no idea of the terrorists' plans.
La España de las autonomías.
And they were about to lose sight of the Tunisian for good.
Surveillance of the Tunisian was stopped. This was due to personnel problems, because the same unit had to cover preparations for the wedding of the Crown Prince of Spain.
The preparations of the Tunisian cell continued undisturbed. The final pieces of their plan were set. They would launch holy war in Europe. By bringing down the roof of Madrid's central train station on thousands of their fellow citizens. The next morning, Madrid's commuters began their daily journey into the city on its busiest train line. It was Thursday, the 11th of March. Exactly 2.5 years after 9/11.
I was one of the first to reach the platform to see what had happened. I could see bodies everywhere. Really a terrible sight.
presentaban unas amputaciones.
Bodies were mutilated with horrific amputations and traumatic injuries. It was a Dante-esque scene.
Un aspecto dantesco. Pues es un ambiente de drama.
You would expect the atmosphere to be dramatic, screaming, moaning, complaining, but this was the opposite.
Es todo lo contrario.
Absolutely silent.
Como un silencio absoluto.
The entire city was in turmoil. 3 other trains were hit, one outside the central Atocha station, and 2 more at stations along the same line. In total, 10 bombs exploded in 4 packed commuter trains. Thousands of people were caught in the chaos. Thousands more injured. And nobody was certain whether the danger was over.
It's not easy to work in this atmosphere when you've been warned there could still be another bomb. There's a smell, a characteristic smell, a mix of smoke, explosive, of lots of things.
Forensics officers got to work, combing the wreckage, bodies, and bags for any evidence that might help identify the bombers. Their colleagues already had an idea who was responsible.
The normal pattern was to think that ETA was behind all the attacks, mainly in Spain.
ETA, or ETA, had been bombing Spaniards for over 30 years as part of an armed campaign to gain independence for the northern Basque region of Spain.
Especially the government of Spain was concentrated in the terrorism of ETA.
Only 3 months earlier, ETA had been caught trying to bomb trains in Madrid.
Everyone was talking about ETA, so I assumed logically that it was ETA.
But the scale of this attack soon provoked doubts.
I thought this does not fit ETA's MO. If it was ETA, they must have gone mad. It was something they'd never done before.
When the bomber's van was discovered hours after the attack, the doubts grew.
When we carried out the inspection, we found a bag with some detonators. 7 detonators and the small remains of a cartridge of dynamite. ETA had not recently used explosives of this kind. They hadn't used Spanish-made explosives for some years.
We also found some tapes with music and what seemed to be prayers in Arabic.
The evidence began to suggest that it was Islamic terrorists who were responsible for the bombing. The counter-terrorism officers, whose job it was to monitor Spain's radical Muslims, couldn't believe it.
The Islamist specialists were overwhelmed by the situation. It can't be. They can't have done this to us. How is it possible if we've got them all under surveillance? They said it definitely couldn't have been the Islamists. That was the situation at the time. ETA experts who were saying it couldn't be them, and Islamist experts who were saying it couldn't be them either.
As March 11th drew to a close, 191 people were dead. A country in shock expected action. Early the next morning, the police got their first real lead. Sorting through the thousands of bags left on the trains, they discovered an unexploded bomb.
The alarm was programmed for 7:40, which was when the rest of the bombs blew up.
Deactivated and deconstructed, the failed bomb was a goldmine of information.
We had a cell phone which was the same brand and model as those used in the Bali bombings in October 2002. We also had a SIM card that could be identified and tracked, just like the cell phones.
The police soon traced the phone cards to the owner of a shop in Lavapiés, whose identity set off instant alarm bells. His name was Jamal Zougam.
Jamal Zougam had been investigated by the police many times before in connection with the Casablanca bombing for suspected membership of the group Takfir wal Hijra and for allowing his apartment to be used as a safe house by Mujahideen on the way from Afghanistan.
Zougam, another Moroccan with ties to the Tunisian, was arrested. Eyewitnesses confirmed they'd seen him on one of the bombed trains.
We started investigating his friends, his contacts, and arrests took place. This led us also to the Tunisian, of course. But the problem was that the Tunisian had disappeared. He couldn't be found.
Serhan, the Tunisian, who had been under surveillance for 8 months before the attack, had quit his job and gone to ground. He and his accomplices awaited the impact of their attack on the Spanish people. But it was not what they expected.
Responsable de este atentado es la banda terrorista ETA.
Before the first arrests, millions of Spaniards had taken to the streets in a show of unity against ETA, the presumed culprits. Although the investigation had turned to the Islamists, the government kept the public focus on ETA.
Esta es la prioridad en la investigación y hay que avanzar y profundizar en esa desde el primer momento hasta el último.
90% of the Spanish people had opposed Aznar's decision to send troops to Iraq. Any suggestion that the bombing was linked to that policy might lose his party the election. The next day, the bombers released a tape that removed all doubt. Before the bombings, Iraq had barely figured as an election issue. Suddenly, it was a huge issue. Hours before the polls were due to open, tens of thousands of people took to the streets. Feeling misled by the government, their anger over the bombing was now directed squarely at Aznar and his colleagues.
I mean, I got the feeling on Saturday. Once I saw all the demonstration, when I saw the Iraqis' pictures and everything, I told my wife, this is the end.
The next day, the voters threw Aznar's party out of power.
This is the decision of the Spaniard people, and I respect. But if the objective of terrorists was to provoke a situation for change government, this is a victory for terrorism.
Incoming socialist president José Luis Zapatero confirmed he'd implement his long-standing policy to withdraw Spanish troops from Iraq. But the bombers were still on the loose. Despite their early arrests, the police were yet to identify those at the heart of the cell. The Tunisian was missing, and his accomplice, El Chino, was not even a suspect. 1 week after the bombings, Chino returned home, eager to discover how the attacks had been received. The very next day, he took his family on a day trip to the bombers' safe house. It was a special occasion.
My daughter said it's Father's Day. Come over and join us and have some paella. They had this picnic in a field a week after March the 11th.
It was Chino's last chance to see his son before he became a wanted man. The police had made a breakthrough. They had traced the explosives used on March 11th to a mine in the far north of Spain. It had been known to Spain's civil guard for several years as the source of low-level illegal explosives trade between small-time thieves and drug dealers.
We activate everything that we have. I mean, we dispatch orders to our unit to say we have information about this could be drug dealing, explosive dealing, linked to Islamist terrorist group. Now you have to review everything you have.
One of their local agents struck gold when his informer told him he knew one of the bombers. He recorded their conversation.
Vino aquí a liarla, te lo juro por mi padre que es que, vamos, estoy segurísimo que es él, ¿eh? Y está aquí todavía, macho.
¿Tú estás seguro que ese tío tiene algo que ver?
Tronco, escúchame, tiene detonadores, tiene mandos a distancia de 300 metros, tiene goma 2, o sea que...
Bueno, pero...
¿Qué quieres saber más? ¿Qué quieres que te diga más?
The informer was convinced that the man responsible for the bombing on March 11 was this Moroccan they call Mowgli, because he looked like the Jungle Book character Mowgli.
Ha estado detenido aquí y no sabes por qué, ¿no?
Por droga, por robos, se fue a cárcel a Marruecos y lo detuvieron. Lo tuvieron marroquíes, ¿no? Y claro, él estuvo en la cárcel de Marruecos en plan dentro de la cárcel, pues cogió contactos desde dentro en Afganistán y ese rollo, ¿me entiendes?
The informer knew too much to be an innocent bystander. The next day, he was arrested. Together with 3 accomplices, he was charged with collaborating with the terrorists. Within hours, he confirmed the identity of the Moroccan known as Mowgli. He was the well-known Madrid drug dealer, Jamal Amidan, El Chino. With the identification of Chino, the police finally understood how the Tunisians group had pulled off the attack.
Jamal Almidan, El Chino, was the connection between the whole network, because in this person was everything concentrated. He was in contact with the ideological leaders, Sarhan, and he was very active in obtaining explosive, and in the meantime obtaining funds from narcotics, and in the meantime dynamizing the whole groups. Really, Jamal Almidan, I think he is a key figure of the 11 of March attack.
The police knew who they were after, but not where to find him. Chino had disappeared again. The pace of the search quickened. Known associates were rounded up, and within days, the bomber's safe house in the country was located.
The house in Morata was searched. We found detonators there, including used ones. And there was also evidence that they had carried out experiments with explosives there.
For the forensics experts, it was a treasure trove. Among the evidence, they had the proof that Chino and the Tunisian had both been in the house.
We found personal objects of all kinds: clothes, underwear, bedclothes, objects that had been used.
Forensic evidence confirmed the identities of their main suspects. Arrest warrants were issued for 6 men. Catching them was another matter. The manhunt was more urgent than the police knew. Chino and the Tunisian were planning a second phase of attacks. Their jihad would continue on April 2nd.
Another bomb on another railway line has sent shockwaves through Spain.
Discovered by rail workers, it was a near miss. Carefully placed for maximum impact, the bomb would have destroyed the train and claimed hundreds more lives.
Now helicopters and army vehicles are to guard railway lines in Spain.
The bombers had always intended that their attacks would culminate in martyrdom.
He called and said, "Take care of yourself, the boy and the family. Be careful. Many things are going to happen, but I cannot tell you what. Just look after yourself and never leave my boy. Perhaps I won't see you again." And that was it.
The next day, cell phones that police had been tracing since March 11th led them to an antenna in another Madrid suburb.
It's an antenna that covers a specific area. Which of these houses, then? Which of these houses were the terrorists staying in?
Officers dispatched to the neighborhood discovered that an apartment had recently been rented to a group of Arab men.
So they waited for some discreet surveillance equipment to arrive. But at that point, someone left the apartment to throw out the trash and suddenly started to run away.
Realizing he'd been spotted, he shouted to his friends inside the building.
Shots were heard from the apartment. They showed the explosives. They threatened to blow everything up.
Inside the apartment were the Tunisian, Chino, and 5 others. The heart of the terrorist cell. Virtually the entire leadership of the police now converged on the jihadists who had eluded them for so long. With the apartment surrounded, the police waited.
He called his mother. He said he was going to die. He asked her to forgive him and told her he loved her very much. He didn't give any further explanations, but just said he would always treasure her in his heart.
Through the Moroccan intelligence services, we were informed that they were making those calls, that they were saying goodbye.
Fearing that they were about to launch a suicide attack, the Special Forces unit went in. The bombers were waiting for them. The blast killed one of the police team and injured 11 others. Chino, the Tunisian, and the other 5 bombers were all dead.
I felt happy because we got them, the authors of the attacks. I was satisfied because I felt that all our efforts had brought about a positive result and that we'd prevented the possibility of their carrying out more attacks.
Chino's body had been blown through the wall of the building into the swimming pool below by the force of the blast. Among the rubble, the police found detailed plans for a massive attack on a local shopping center and other city. The Madrid cell was finished. Most of Spain's Muslims had been appalled by their actions. Across Europe, Muslim communities faced the same realization, that the anger of a minority within might be turned to violence. Events in Iraq were provoking fury.
Images till now kept from public view. New grim testimony of what went on in Abu Ghraib jail.
Such scandals reinforced a widespread feeling that their values and fellow Muslims were under attack from the West. A notion fueled by what many were watching on Arab satellite TV. Through jihadist websites, extremists nurtured the anger of the young and impressionable. And as Muslims demonstrated, it was that minority whose fury jihadist groups set out to exploit as they looked for new recruits to their holy war. Some were set to follow the lead of the Madrid cell. Here, in the Italian city of Milan, Prosecutors were about to discover how some young Muslims were being prepared for jihad. Spanish police alerted them to a terrorist they had tracked to the city.
In particular, they pointed out that one man who was linked to the people thought to be involved with the Madrid attacks was in fact in Italy. Si trovava nel territorio dello Stato italiano.
His name was Rabeh Osman. A veteran jihadist, he had spent time in Afghanistan, Germany, France, and Spain, where he'd also worked closely with the Tunisian. The Italians immediately put Rabeh under surveillance.
Abbiamo deciso un intervento abbastanza veloce, nel senso che era...
We had to act quickly. The suspect was continuously followed and listened to constantly.
Recruiting one of Europe's young Muslims, he knew exactly how to make an impact.
شايف بيعملوا ايه باخواننا في العراق؟ شايف بيعملوا ايه باخواننا العرب؟ شفت السجون، شفت الإذلال. الحل الوحيد هو الالتحاق بالقاعدة. انت عارف ان المكافأة لمن يختار الموت ليس لها حدود.
Rabeh was one of a generation of veterans who'd been tasked with shaping the future of jihad 4 years earlier by a senior Al-Qaeda thinker.
هم مدعوين أن يشكلوا سرايا يقاوموا هذا الطائف كل بمفرده سرية كما ذكر ابن القيم شكل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Rabeh's latest protege was one of a number of young men and women in Europe being carefully prepared for jihad.
This young man was learning many things from Rabeh, and he was also making important decisions. He was deciding at that time, thanks to Rabeh, to leave for a martyrdom operation.
أنا جاهز لأضحي بنفسي.
يا أخي يا يحيى أنا أقدر حماسك ولكن ابقى هادئ. اعتبر إنك وصلت إلى الجنة لأنك جاهز إنك تضحي بنفسك.
Non si tratta di un sermone radicale.
It wasn't just someone preaching radical sermons. This was two people making plans, talking about what they were going to do.
In June 2004, Rabeh was arrested, but he had already helped to sow the seeds of radical Islam across Europe. Italian surveillance tapes revealed how far the jihadists' web had spread.
They convey the idea of the distribution and the links, not in just one or two countries, but in many European countries. So not just Italy and Spain, but more specifically Belgium, France, Germany, the Netherlands, the United States.
Many of these countries were yet to face the reality of an attack. Their publics remained unbothered and untouched by the nascent threat. But some of Europe's young Muslims felt increasingly at odds with societies in which they felt no place and saw no future, distanced from the mores of their immigrant parents and detached from the secular culture of their own country. In their search for identity, a minority were seduced by the radical ideology of Islamic fundamentalism. It played on their sense of alienation and persecution.
They should be aware what it means to be Muslim in this godforsaken country.
And it gave their anger a voice.
We've been born in what you can call the cesspit, the trash bin of humanity.
The democratic societies they attacked were unsure how to react. Yet a few of their citizens would go further, and for the first time, contemplate jihad against the country of their birth. Just 8 months after the Madrid bombing, another event was about to shake Europe's confidence. In Holland, the most liberal society of them all, the authorities were anxiously watching a group of young Dutch Muslims. One of their number, half-American Jason Walters, regularly discussed jihad on the internet.
They talk about going to training camps in Pakistan or Afghanistan. They talk about what they want to do with the people that are non-believers. So the chats we found on his computer were important to say, yes, there was a group, and Yes, this is what they were doing.
Jason, son of an American ex-serviceman, was born in Holland, along with his younger brother, Jermaine.
We were young. We did things that most of the people would do, in our neighborhood, let me say that. Going to discotheques and bars and a little bit criminal side, but not too much,
But his elder brother, Jason, started to become a role model.
My brother was a guy that practiced Islam very good, So everybody had respect for him. So I also had respect for him. I saw him as a good person. He taught me everything and learned me everything and guided me on the path of Islam again.
It was a path that began to make him see things around him differently.
Most people in the West just think simple. They think if I have my house, my beer, and my television, everything is good. The whole world can drop dead. But when I get Islam, I just was thinking more about life and what's the sense of life.
Many of Holland's million Muslims took their faith from the Islamic tradition of their countries of origin. But some of the younger generation looked for their own way. Soon Jermaine and his brother were attending regular lounge meetings where friends gave voice to their alienation from Dutch society.
During those house gatherings, they were taught about ideology. They had to pay attention.
It's just friends getting together, like a few Americans getting in a bar and just talk and have a beer and something, eat a little bit, and then it's just Quran, and then you talk about this or politics, yes.
They had to make notes. They had to watch violent movies, beheading movies. So it was really education.
Everybody's raising questions, why this, why that, why Europe support America. They want to know why they're attacking our countries, raping our women, shooting our children, and the people in Iraq. They were driven out their houses by Bush, and why there was no reason before it. They say it's Saddam, weapons of mass destruction, but the people were the victims of it.
Anger at what they saw as the global oppression of Muslims was matched by the discomfort of life in ultra-liberal Holland.
It's hard to live with, Let me say, I walk to Amsterdam, and then I see gay bars or hookers or coffee shops.
Marginalized in a society they could not conform to, young Dutch Muslims felt rootless. Some found answers in a fundamentalist reading of Islamic Sharia law. A clash with Europe's most permissive society was inevitable.
Let me say, somebody steals from you, they will sentence somebody to 3 months in jail, But the Sharia says you got to take his hand off, If everything is good investigated, then his hand got to be cut off. But the people here work with a different system, And that brings problems with it.
The group increasingly saw their own government as the enemy. Jason, recently returned from a terrorist training camp in Pakistan, went online to discuss a death list of the most culpable politicians. His jihad would be fought at home.
The government is almost in war with Islam, and that's why we hate the government and its system. You have Osama bin Laden. He says, why come all the way here if you can do their jihad, We will get them in their own countries, You can think like that, but you got to be careful,
A particularly outspoken critic of Islam in the Netherlands was filmmaker Theo van Gogh. He had recently produced a controversial film about Islam's treatment of women with Muslim Member of Parliament Hirsi Ali.
Guilty.
Both were on the group's death list.
The people saw him as the enemy of Islam, a big enemy, because the things he said, in other countries you can't say that. He had no reason to it. But the only thing he did it for was the attention and the money he get for it. That was the whole problem.
A Dutch director who made a controversial film about violence against women in Muslim communities has been murdered in Amsterdam. Theo van Gogh...
Pinned to his body with a knife, the killer had left a 5-page letter calling for global holy war and threatening MP Hirsi Ali. It went on to state that the United States, Europe, and other non-believers of Islam were going to meet with disaster.
eyewitnesses, the attacker shot the stricken filmmaker half a dozen times to make sure he was dead.
Van Gogh's killer was friend of the Walters brothers and a host of their lounge meetings, Mohammed Bouyeri.
He was just a normal person. You won't see something special about him, just a Muslim practicing, but not a special one or something.
It was a landmark in the jihad. The first attack in Europe to be carried out by a Muslim born and raised there.
I was shocked about it because I didn't expect it. But there was a sense of, happiness or,
Rounded up. Police were dispatched to a quiet working-class neighborhood in the Dutch capital, home of Germain's brother, Jason.
When the squad team wanted to arrest Jason, and Jason threw a hand grenade through the door, right in the middle of the group of policemen. 5 of them were heavily injured, so they had to pull back. From there on, Jason and Ismail stayed in the house. They called family. Jason called his brother.
He was hysteric. Not hysteric, but really, upset. I said, what's happened? He said, police came to my house and they were shooting at me. And he said, there were hand grenades and we threw hand grenades and then everything got out of hand,
Just as the Spanish had done in Madrid, the police put this seemingly ordinary apartment under siege.
They yelled from the window that they had 20 kilos of explosives and they were going to use them. This was quite a situation.
Er hebben politie, scherpschutters en antiterreureenheden.
I watched the TV. I saw my brother's house surrounded, maybe 500 policemen, 5 helicopters, SWAT team, everything. Everything they had in the Netherlands, they brought out for just 2 guys.
Een ambulance was het enige zichtbare bewijs.
After 14 hours, the siege was brought to an end. Shot in the shoulder, Jason and his roommate were arrested. In common with many would-be jihadists across Europe, Jason and his friends presented themselves as an innocent study group, but the mask soon slipped.
Where the others maybe were saying, we were a group, but only a group of friends. That's at least what they were sort of trying to say. But then Samir A said, yes, I know all of them. Yes, we all came in the lounge gatherings, and yes, we have one ideology. We hate all of you. Boom. There it was.
Jason Walters was sentenced to 15 years in prison. His brother Germain was also arrested under suspicion of planning an attack. But after 6 months in prison, he was released without charge.
They know you are innocent and there's no proof against you, but they let you there. And the claim you have on your head now, everybody knows me as a terrorist now.
So how do you distinguish between a radical Islamist and a potential terrorist?
Action, violent action, or preparation for action. There's the difference. The one is a mindset, and the other one is the mindset comes to action. And yes, where is the division? That's difficult, but you need action.
After Holland, the action got worse.
The Prime Minister said he was shocked to learn that the bombers were homegrown terrorists born and raised in the United Kingdom.
56 deaths in London drove home the realization that this new threat was here to stay.
He had a respectable job as a classroom assistant, but Sadiq Khan was in fact a terrorist.
We are at war and I'm a soldier.
With homegrown terrorists like this London bomber so hard to spot, debate rages over where to draw the line.
Sometimes we have the impression that we have to wait that still somebody is killed, then we have the right, then we can act, because before someone is killing, nothing is punishable. I don't think this is right.
Good morning. Sears Tower terror plot.
In Europe and America, the pressure to prevent more terror attacks is greater than ever. The challenge is to protect the rights of individual Muslims. Get the balance wrong, and the risk is increasing Muslim anger. Lose the battle for their hearts and minds, and more young Muslims might be encouraged to join the jihad.
The 4 young men who came from cities north of here to attack Londoners were quickly identified through surveillance cameras. In their recorded suicide statements, they said they acted to stop Britain from fighting Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan. They'd all been born and educated in Britain, and their accents made them sound quite English.
You may wonder what you've done to deserve this.
Why were they radicalized to a degree far more extreme than has appeared among American Muslims? One difference could be colonialism. They were the children or grandchildren of immigrants from Pakistan. That left them feeling apart, not able to become truly British, not belonging anywhere. Islamism, jihad, could offer them a stronger identity, their youthful rebellion, a fiercer focus. Young Muslims in France, Italy, Holland, and Spain have the same complaint. Their former colonial masters will make them citizens, but leave them feeling apart. The United States and Canada have no colonial legacy. They're countries intended for immigrants who will become full citizens. And there's a further difference. Most of Europe's Muslims arrived first as third world laborers. North America drew more educated people who could move quickly into the middle classes. Next tonight, we'll see how valid these differences really are as we look at the lives of Muslims who are Americans.
Funding for America at a Crossroads was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.